Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer LB4322-400-632 single acting spring hinge, full mortise, residential weight, lube bearing, steel base, polished brass hinge. So let's dissect that part number. First of all, the LB part means that this is a maintenance-free lube bearing, a maintenance-free sort of bearing on their spring hinge. The 4322 is a representation of the fact that this is a specific hinge for a Permador type brand door and frame, meaning that the screw hole locations are specific to that brand, along with the radiused corner. Okay. The -400 is a reference to the size. The size on this kind of hinge is always the first dimension, and that's 4 inch. 400 means it's 4 inch by 4 inch, so it's 4 inch tall, 4 inch wide. The 632 means that it is in the polished brass finish, like a US 3, but specifically 632 means that it is a polished brass finish on a steel base material. So this magnet is going to stick to it. Okay, so it's steel base. It is a single acting residential weight hinge, full mortise. You can see that it's full mortise from the swag on the hinges, such that when the door is closed, those leaves would be mortised and flush to the edge of the door and of course to the frame. Single acting, closes the door in one direction. Okay. There's a link below this video to the template, which shows everything important dimensionally about this hinge specifically for Permador. So by all means check and make sure that everything matches up before you order this. Okay, handy reference. There's also a reference to instructions, which you'll likely get a hinge in a box like this, and they're on the back of the box as well. But let's go over it. Basically, setting the tension on this is quite simple. This is called the tension collar. It's only at one end of the hinge. It's only typically at the top. Okay, and when the tension collar is at the top, you would insert that black piece of steel is called a tension rod. Okay. Those two little pins down there are the tension pins. This order happens to have 2 hinges on it, so there are 2 pins. You would only use 1 per hinge. And you would insert the tension rod into one of the holes and turn it clockwise. And you reveal in that process new holes, and you're creating tension on the spring. And into one of those new holes, you would insert a tension pin, and that would hold the tension on the hinge. That's how this becomes self-closing. Leaf thickness on this hinge is 0.096, which is typical for residential. Okay, so this is going to work in residential preparations from 85 thousandths to about 190 thousandths deep mortises. There's also below this video a guide in terms of how many hinges you would use given the door size and door weight. Generally, you wouldn't be dealing with anything over 3 foot by 7 foot. But if you had a door up to 85 pounds, you'd use 2 spring hinges. And up to 110 pounds, you'd have 3 spring hinges. Now, I'm a fan of all spring hinges, regardless if it's 2 or 3. Because I have found that first of all, they're inexpensive. Second of all, I have found a greater amount of success, a greater success rate when I'm setting the tension on spring hinges to get a door not only closed, but latched as well. And it's the latching part that's the part that's really important. You can close the door, but you need it to latch. And I have found if I've got 1 spring hinge when I should have used 2, or 2 when I should have used 3, I can get the door closed. But to get it to latch, I've got to set the tension real high on the spring so that I get enough inertia moving through the open. Enough inertia through the closing cycle. And what I have found is that the door actually slams because I've got to get it moving so quick. And I don't like to set so much tension on those springs because you get too much tension, you can actually hear them creak when they open, and that's when you're way beyond the engineered capacity of the hinge. I have found that when I've got all 3 spring hinges, or 2 when maybe 1 worked, is that I get a greater amount of, let's say, torque. The ability to close the door without having to get it moving very quickly, but enough tension on the springs to get it to overcome the wind pressure of the door coming through the opening, but also the resistance of the latch bolt as it hits the frame. We want that to close and latch nicely without slamming, and certainly not without failing to close, because typically spring hinges, they're used on doors when people just want them to close behind them, but they're also used on fire-rated doors, which means it's required by code that the doors actually close and latch. They got to close, but it's no good to close if they don't latch. They have to be latched. Bommer has this hinge available in several different finishes for the perma door. Whatever finish you need, they'll be able to accommodate. They make a full complement of these sorts of residential replacement spring hinges for every major manufacturer of doors, whether it's Permador or a dozen others. Very good quality product. Includes all wood screws, all machine screws. You never know what you're going to encounter in a complementary finish. Last thing I'd like to show you is the logo. It says Bommer. Right above it says Made in USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. Any questions on the Bommer LB4322-400-632 single acting spring hinge for Permador, polished brass, or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.